Thank you for pressing start on episode 16 of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcast. Today we have 2 secret games, followed by a review of our featured game, Celeste. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. I'm Bopo. Joining me is my player 2, DiscoCola. What's going on, Disco?
I'm a little winded from all my hiking this week, but I'm okay. How are you, Bopo?
I'm doing just fine. My evil yet benevolent side of my personality. Is that a reference to Celeste you made?
Yes, but also one of my family's cars broke down, so I have been walking to work this week.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Well, you've got your own problems going on, kind of like Madeline, the main protagonist of our featured game today, Celeste.
Precisely, yeah.
Well, this season, something that's been going on is that some of our featured games have made my hands hurt.
Oh.
And I'm noticing it's every other game that we pick as our featured game. So Hollow Knight for episode 1.
Doki Doki really took it out of you?
Yes. Yes, as did What Remains of Edith Finch. Like that one just destroyed. It gave me carpal tunnel, that one. No. Hollow Knight episode 1 of season 2 and Death's Door episode 3 of season 2 both made my hands hurt for slightly different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And this game continues that trend. Celeste.
It sure does.
So I wonder if this will be a pattern we see throughout the season. I guess episode 7 will be Momodora.
Oh, so very possible.
You're the one who's played that game,
I did
so
play
maybe.
That.
So excited to talk about Celeste with you. Was that a game you had played before?
I turned it on for about 45 minutes when my physical copy arrived, but I wasn't ready to explore it quite yet because I knew it was a difficult game. I hadn't decided if I wanted to dedicate my DiscoCola profile to those trophies quite yet.
Yes, you only like to start a game if you know you can complete it on your profile and get that 100%, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Well, so far in Underplayed, this is our 16th episode overall. We've played more featured games that you had played like pretty much to completion before at some point in your life. Less games that I had played to completion before in my life. So we've played, Axiom Verge.
Mm-hmm.
We've played Doki Doki. You were really familiar with that one. Hadn't necessarily played through it. Hollow Knight. You were really familiar with Hollow Knight. I had never touched Hollow Knight. Hyperlight Drifter. Yeah. I had played it, but you had, eaten and dreamt about and any applicable verb
You're not
with
wrong.
that game.
Yeah.
But this is one time where you're sitting in my church now with Celeste, because I had played this game, not really as much as you had played Hyperlight Drifter, but I'd finished it several years back when it released. So I'm excited to talk about a game that I might have a little bit more experience with this time.
Yeah, I know this episode's going to be full of, I don't know what your secret game is, but this is going to be a very positive episode. I can feel it.
Oh, that's really good. Nice. I'm excited for that. Well, another thing, I'm not sure if I mentioned it on a previous episode in this kind of introduction section, but I platinumed Death's Door using some of the tips you gave me after episode 3. I had to do that umbrella run.
Yeah.
Not sure if I mentioned it last episode, but I did use a lot of your tips for
I don't even remember what those tips were, but
it was a lot of like the upgrading stuff.
Oh, right,
just how to compose yourself. So that really helped out. And just having that experience doing the first full playthrough blind and now going in with that umbrella. It was really fun. It was really fun because it changed the game. It gave me a little bit more challenge. And that game again is just tuned just right. So I had a lot of fun doing that. So we now both have the platinum in that game.
Congratulations to us.
Yes. Let's move on to our secret games.
Secret games.
Secret games.
I know you're playing without me.
Secret games.
Well, I'm here to tell you, baby.
Secret games.
I've been playing too.
Secret games.
Ooh.
In this segment, we each review one indie game we've been playing in secret since our last episode. We don't discuss our picks in advance. We keep them a surprise for this very moment. We can choose any indie game as long as we have not reviewed it on Underplayed before. We will start with you, DiscoCola. Let the mystery be no more. Reveal your secret game for episode 16.
All right. I actually have a game that synergizes in multiple ways. My secret game for this episode of Underplayed is Iconoclasts.
Oh, you've told me about Iconoclasts before. I've never played it myself.
Iconoclasts was developed by a singular human, Joachim Sandberg, otherwise known as Konjak. And again, he's a Swedish gentleman, so apologies for incorrect pronunciations, but I did try to look it up. It's a 16-bit style adventure platformer with Metroidvania elements, released in 2018, just 2 days prior to Celeste.
No way.
2 days prior.
No way. That's crazy.
When I picked it, I thought it was the same day, but when I actually looked up the release date, it was just a couple days before. In Iconoclasts, you play as Robin, a young mechanic who lives alone in a place called Blockrock after the passing of her father. When the game opens, Robin is shaken awake by an earthquake. She sets out to investigate the cause of the quake, armed with her stun pistol. After exploring a little bit of Blockrock, you discover the cause of the quake, which is a cyclopean wheel of some sort. And then you do the boss battle, and after finding your way back home from the battle, you arrive at your home where Agent White and Agent Black are in your home searching for contraband. In this world, being a mechanic is illegal, or having any job is illegal unless otherwise authorized by the One Concern, which is the religious power that controls the nation. After the agents fail to find anything and leave, Robin retrieves her giant wrench from its hiding place. This wrench then is, of course, that illegal contraband and will act as your melee weapon moving forward. This wrench also does what wrenches do, which is turn bolts. Doing so will activate a variety of things like opening doors, turning on machines, or in some cases just acting as a swinging grapple point that you swing on with your wrench. From there, you visit Settlement 17, which is where many of the illegal repairs are suspected to be taking place. Settlement 17 is also the home of Elro, Robin's brother, as well as Elro's wife and daughter. While here, Robin is caught in the act of repairing Elro's house by the same Agent Black and Agent White, and this sets so many dominoes in motion, which will ultimately lead to Robin meeting the rest of the main cast: Mina, a brash pirate from the world's other primary religion; Royal, an elite member of the One Concern, meant to someday take his place as the head figure; and General Chrome, a young, idealistic member of One Concern, similar in rank to Agents Black and White. In Iconoclasts, you explore the world to help all of your different friends achieve their goals, meeting a wide variety of characters along the way, each of which with unique motivations and backgrounds and speech patterns, all the while exploring different zones of the nation, each sporting their own unique visual appearance, enemies, and hidden items. So that's the main setup and premise. Beyond that, the game features your standard platforming affair. You have a jump, a stun gun, the melee wrench, and a series of unique boss battles. It also features a tweaking mechanic. Again, you are a mechanic, so this allows you to use those hidden items you find to craft upgrades. You can equip up to 3 different upgrades at a time, allowing you to adapt to your favorite playstyle or to unique situations that you might find yourself in. So here are a couple examples. One of the tweaks might give you extra damage on your wrench, or a slower cooldown for your charge shots with your stun gun, or it might give you a rolling dodge to quickly maneuver in boss battles. So I kind of want to start by going over what I don't like about this game. First off, there's an area called the Tower, and I dread that zone. It's very vertical and cramped, and it's kind of hard to keep track of which floors contain which obstacles or items you're trying to keep track of. Also, one of the other things I don't like is there's about 3 or 4 hidden items that I think are just a little bit too hard to find. There's even an item finder tweak, and it doesn't really help find those sometimes. So if you don't remember from your last playthrough, you're probably I forgot, and I've played this game quite a few times at this point. But that's about it. I pretty much love everything else about this game. I think the controls in this game are super tight. The jumping arc and height feels perfect. Swinging with your wrench is amazing. Everything you do seems intuitive. Even crawling, the slowest action you can do in the game, still feels good and natural in comparison to your other actions. The game is also one of those great examples of a game that teaches you how to play the game by playing the game. Objects are meant to be obstacles or distinctive. You know that you have to come back later after you acquire something. So an example of that would be one of the first obstacles you can overcome is like this wall of light gray rocks, and you destroy that by charging up your stun gun. And the game gives you a sign that says, if you charge your stun gun, you will destroy this wall of blocks. So it gives you that breadcrumb. But on the way there, you went past another wall of rocks. So you have to remember, oh, hey, I passed this earlier. I should go try and shoot that with my stun gun. But when you get back there, they are a different color of rocks. And so what that says to you is, I can destroy these rocks, and I assume it's with my gun, but I bet there's an upgrade I get to my gun later.
It's a lot like Metroid games do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you know that there are upgrades coming to your gun and maybe to your wrench. So that's just one small example of how the game teaches you how to operate in this world. The music in this game is so incredible. Also, all composed by Konjac. It evolves as the story evolves, and I'd even argue that at the start, the song in Block Rock paired with the like bright greens and stylistic art sort of sets an incredibly false sense of what the game is going to be, making all of the story beats like way more impactful as the story rolls on.
Yeah, even just in the trailer, I loved the music in that, especially how they put the extra care and attention to making it match up with all the glimpses into the characters and the story. I'm sure that kind of care and attention is carried throughout the game.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, music is so incredible, fits all the different zones so well. And then speaking of stylistic art, that's probably like my absolute favorite thing about Iconoclasts. Konjac's pixel art is pretty much my favorite at this point. Like even just following him on Twitter and looking at some of his pre-Iconoclast work and some of his upcoming stuff, it looks all amazing. This is one of those games that I bought the game right after I saw the trailer. I didn't look for reviews. I didn't do any research. I saw the trailer and I was like, this looks fun and the art style is incredible. And in addition to the great art style, the pixel art animations are just so crazy full of life. There's like subtle movements that are used to convey just like the smallest emotions during dialogue. You can see emotions like shame and contempt and exasperation and even sarcasm in pixel art animations. That's crazy.
Yeah, how many games can do that? That's crazy.
So few. The character Mina especially just has so many of these animations, and it's just so incredible to watch.
Even the idling, just characters standing there, there's a lot of expressiveness there.
Absolutely.
A lot of character just when they're standing there talking to each other.
It's not just, like Mega Man blinking, there's like breath, and not like a fast breath, but like a natural inhale, exhale. Oh, it's so incredible. And here's another thing that you're never really going to hear me comment on unless it's like particularly egregious. But this game has an incredible user interface.
Really?
Yeah, I don't even often like think about UIs, which is probably the sign of at least a decent UI. But if I had to point out maybe some really great ones, I'd say Hollow Knight, most Mega Mans, and Iconoclast is among those. You're never really left forgetting like which weapon you have equipped, what the status is of your tweaks, and what those tweaks actually do given their like visual representation. And I probably wouldn't have noticed this if I wasn't playing recently on an older television that doesn't correctly display 16 by 9. So I'm like missing a pretty significant outer edge of my entire screen right now. But it doesn't matter with Iconoclasts because everything there's margins there, and so you get to still see everything. Whereas games like Hades and even Doki Doki, some of my menus just being eaten up by this display issue. So like obviously you don't have to have margins to be a good UI, but that's what clued me into just how good the UI actually is all around. So yeah, I'm not missing any of my vital information. So Bopo, I'm sure that if you didn't write down my score as soon as I said the name of the game, you probably could have guessed it. I think everything about this game is near perfect. I give Iconoclast a 10 out of 10.
Wow. Holy moly. I
This-
actually was not expecting that. I thought maybe 9 or 9.5, but
oh, baby.
full 10 for you. That's so awesome.
Yeah,
Cool.
the story, characters are all compelling. It beautifully explores topics like religion, power, self-worth, personal boundaries, class structures, and so many other important topics. You will laugh, you will cry, literally. I would be surprised if you didn't. And even if you skip all the story, it's just so fun to play. It is the perfect modern game for SNES and Genesis fans. I personally can't seem to turn it on and play it without collecting all the items, which to me is a sign of a good game. That's why I love Mega Man's so much. I think this game is perfectly worthy of being a featured game.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I played it as a secret game because I feel like I probably would have gotten really defensive about it if you ended up not feeling the same as me.
Yeah, we would have some conflict. Well, I'd probably love it too, based on what kind of game it is and how well it does everything that it does. I love that this is a game that you got to revisit. This is our first 10 out of 10 secret game
Is that correct?
on our show, I think, because I think we've only rated feature games 10 so far. So
Interesting.
this is a first
yeah.
on episode 16 of Underplayed.
Yeah.
Very cool. Love a well-tuned jump. You know, we talk about that being one of the first things we look for in platformers. How's the jump feel? We'll talk about that with Celeste, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I like that this also had some different mechanics for you to, yes, it was similar to Celeste in a lot of ways, but contrasts really well with Celeste because you've got a wrench, you've got some combat, you've got ways of solving puzzles using a tool that's also, you also get upgrades. You know, you come back to places later with new abilities and you see the game in a new way. So I like that it has that hybrid. And also cool that it has, you know, you've talked about this game before with me and how much you like it, but I didn't know about some of those story details, like the religions, the agents, some of your friends and allies. Is there a lot of lore in the game talking about the different factions or religions? Is there like a layer that you can delve into there?
Yeah, there is. You get a lot through conversational context. There's even, I could see some people arguing that there's a little bit too much dialogue, which again, you can skip. So invalid argument in my opinion, but you get it through dialogue without being drowned in it.
Okay.
I would say it doesn't feel like you're reading a high fantasy novel or anything.
Right.
But you get the basics of the lore and where each faction lies. And there's also like journal entries that are littered throughout the world that are again optional to read. So you get context from one concerned scientist's, journal entries about how their experiments are going, or you get information, when you're visiting the pirate home in Izuligar. I don't know how to pronounce it, but so there's extra context if you want it, but you get enough of it just from playing out the story.
That's awesome. It's so organically embedded into what you're experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, that is DiscoCola's secret game, Iconoclasts. He rated it a 10 out of 10.
Yep.
Did you say what platforms it's on?
Nope. And I want to give a couple of disclaimers real quick. I really wanted to play this during the Celeste episode, just because I feel like it got overshadowed by Celeste just coming out in the same week. And I think there's a lot of indie game fans that were probably looking forward to Celeste that might have missed this one on their radar. So I hope if you're a fan of Celeste and you've never heard of Iconoclasts, check it out. It's one of my favorite games of all time. And Iconoclasts is available physically from Limited Run Games on Switch and PS4, which is how I played it. It is also on Xbox One, Windows, PS Vita, Mac OS, and Linux.
Nice. Very cool. And also digitally on PC/PS4, right?
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, it's time for my secret game. My secret game is called Snakeybus.
Fascinating. I've never once heard of that, but maybe.
I just sent you the trailer.
Let's check it out.
So Snakeybus is a 2019 arcade action game. I'd be adventurous enough to call it a Snake-like, the classic arcade game Snake.
The game Snake, yeah.
Or there's another one, Nibbler. You've probably heard of Nibbler. I'm going to read the game synopsis from the Steam storefront. Quote, "The length of your bus grows as you pick up more people. Snake through the streets and avoid crashing into yourself." End quote. It's probably the most straightforward game synopsis I've ever read. It was developed by Stovetop LLC and Stage Clear Studios. It was also published by Stovetop LLC and Digerati. So in this game, it's very much Crazy Taxi meets Snake/Nibbler, but a bit slower paced, maybe. It's a 3D game where you drive a bus that is constantly moving. You can't stop. You can accelerate. I think you can slow down too. And you pick up passengers and you have to drop them off at a drop-off point. The map will kind of spawn this area randomly and it'll say, hey, drop off. When your bus gets full, drop off your people here. Every time you drop passengers off, your bus length grows. You get more segments to your bus, thus making a bigger obstacle for yourself. But in return, you can carry more passengers at a time, so you don't have to worry about making as many drop-offs. You can speed up, you can do a jump, but the jump has a timer, so you have to use it sparingly. But when you do jump, you go super high. I mean, it's like a crazy high accelerated jump. And then the better you do, the more points you score, and your cumulative score is tracked, and that's what determines what maps and vehicles you unlock. You can see your total score over time on the main menu, and your runs end when you either run into yourself and stop moving, or if you fall into an obstacle like a lake of water, something like that, it just kind of instantly stops your run, and you can then replay that stage if you want, or go back to the main menu and pick a different vehicle or pick a different map. There's a big variety with the maps. There's a dorm room. There's a miniature version of Seattle. There's a museum, a suburb, a miniature version of Paris, a miniature version of Miami. There's a Coriolis stage. There's a cave. So there's a big variety in the number of stages that are offered. And I mentioned you can change your vehicle. So you unlock different buses. You start with a transit bus. You can unlock a school bus, a party bus. You can unlock a bus called Cluster Truck, which is actually a reference to one of my favorite indie games. It's in my top 100 indie games list, called Cluster Truck. It's a truck from that game. That's a 3D platforming game where you're hopping on top of trucks, and if you touch the ground, you die. Okay. And so they had some kind of collaboration or inspiration from that game to put that as a skin in this game. So that's kind of fun. You can unlock a double-decker bus. You can be a dragon head. There isn't much story or framing for this game. It's just kind of a game that exists and it happens. So when you start the game, it just kind of starts and you're in this bus that's moving and you have to pick people up. So in this game, I really liked that it tested my ability to both react really quickly and plan ahead. When you start the stage, you think, okay, this stage looks like this. It's very big, so I can kind of go wherever I want. There's very little risk. Or you might be in a small stage and you have to very carefully plan your movements. And you start to ask yourself questions like, should I focus on beelining it to my drop-off points with tighter movements, or should I go out of my way to make this really big circle around the perimeter of the level and then focus on picking up people and dropping them off? As your bus gets longer and longer, you have to start doing the latter, where you go out of your way to make sure you don't run into yourself later. And as that bus gets longer and longer, the risk of hitting yourself gets higher and you start doing less of the planning and more of the reacting. The game has a good one more try feel to it, especially for a certain achievement where you have to get a certain number of segments to your bus. There's an achievement / trophy. It's actually called Blaze It, and you have to get 400.
Oh, no.
You have to get 420 segments to to your bus, and that's the hardest achievement / trophy in the game by far. And that actually took me like an hour to get. I had to look up like what the best stage was for that particular trophy, and I grinded on that for a while, but eventually got that one. I also like that the way unlockables work is with the cumulative score. Even when you have a run that sucks, you might have a really low score, but that's ultimately added to your total score, that works towards unlocking the next boss or the next map.
Cool.
So it always felt like I was working toward unlocking something. It's not like I had to get a 500 segment bus before I could unlock this map. It's more that, just over time, you have to score a total of 10,000 points to unlock this, 15,000 points to unlock this. And within a matter of a couple hours, you unlock, I think, everything in the game and you get all the trophies. So I got a pretty easy platinum out of this with just a few hours of playtime. And I do love that reference to Cluster Truck. I like seeing that in indie games. So whenever that happens, it just, I wasn't expecting it with this game at all, and it made me really happy. What I disliked, the game does just kind of start with no fanfare. The presentation is very minimal in a way that feels like unexciting. The jumping can be really chaotic and hard to steer and control. So you'll start to approach yourself and you need to get out of the way. You can't go left or right because you'll just run into yourself. And so your only route out of that is to jump. And sometimes the jump was so difficult to control for me that the jump would land me in, a lake that would kill me, or it would mess up the camera angle and I couldn't see where I was about to go. And so it actually didn't do me any better to jump. So that was a little distracting and frustrating. Sometimes when you're running around in a circle, you'll see your tail end. And sometimes there's this stuttery, glitchy effect that's happening at your tail end. And I think it happens when you reach a certain segment length. The game just stops rendering all of your segments. And as a result of that, if you happen to see your very last segment, sometimes there's this effect where it's kind of like stuttering in place. And then once enough time passes, it kind of shifts forward. So that seems like that was unintentional. And then the game overall is just kind of one note. It kind of is this simple concept in this arcade action game that you're playing for a couple hours. And it's quite fun while you're playing it. But after you're done with the experience, especially with the trophies, you're really not going to think about it again. And I haven't really thought back to it since I played it. So overall, I think if this were just reaction-based or just about planning ahead, I would have grown more tired of it quickly. It's fun in the moment you're playing. After the 2 hours, you feel full and you're ready to not think about it again. So I'm going to rate this 5.5 out of 10. It is playable on PC, Mac, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, which is how I played it, and Xbox One. So pretty straightforward review, pretty straightforward game that I picked this time.
Yeah.
Don't have a lot more to say on it, really.
Yeah, so when I watched the trailer, I looked it up to confirm I had seen someone play this before. And yeah, chaotic was a word that I definitely would latch onto there for sure, based on what I remember seeing. I guess my main question to you is, how in the heck did you even decide to play this specific? We haven't really played something like this on Underplay. It's almost like a party game.
Yeah, kind of.
We haven't really played anything like it.
It would be a fun party game to pass the controller around and just see like, okay, with this bus and this map, who can get the longest bus? That'd be kind of fun. But I picked this game kind of arbitrarily, randomly, partly because it's very unlike other games we've played. I'm just trying to get a wide variety of stuff in our play history. So I wanted to pick an arcade action game that was unlike what I personally have played so far. So I think that's what I can chalk it up to.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are our secret games, Iconoclasts and Snakeybus. We can move on to our review of Celeste. It is our featured game. So Celeste is a 2018 platformer developed by Extremely OK Games and published by Extremely OK Games. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, "Help Madeline survive her inner demons on her journey to the top of Celeste Mountain in this super tight platformer from the creators of Towerfall. Brave hundreds of handcrafted challenges, uncover devious secrets, and piece together the mystery of the mountain." End quote. This game actually began back in 2015 with a game jam. Are you familiar with the concept of a game jam?
I have a guess as to what that is, but
From my understanding, it's an event where people create a game on the spot. They almost improvise creating a simple game, usually over the course of a day, a few hours, a couple days. And there was a game jam in 2015 where Maddie Thorson and Joel Berry collaborated over one weekend to make what's known as Celeste Classic. So Celeste Classic was made for Pico 8, which is a game engine that replicates old school 8-bit era systems. And so people have the tools to develop for it today. A lot of them, I think, publish games just for free online. And that's how Celeste Classic got out there. It was just this free game made for this game jam. They only used 16 colors for Celeste Classic. It comprised 30 bite-sized levels, and you can actually play the entirety of Celeste Classic within Celeste 2018 as kind of a bonus side game in the game. So Celeste Classic was an instant hit. The developers saw potential in this game. They thought we could expand this, we could increase our team, we could give this thing more art. It could just be more technical. And so over the next 3 years, they developed Celeste as we know it today. And as a result of all of their work, bringing on more artists and more musicians and just making a longer, more fleshed out game, Celeste was a financial success. It was nominated for Game of the Year at the 2018 Game Awards, and it won Best Independent Game and Games for Impact Awards. And it's become really big in the speedrunning community.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd like to know your experience with watching that kind of content, if you have that, a little bit later. In this game, it's a 2D platformer where you play as Madeline, who's trying to climb Celeste Mountain. It has a pixel art style with lots of bright colors and really simple character designs. I noticed that, no facial features. You don't even see eyes on the characters. You'll see like facial hair on one of them, but other parts of the character design are really detailed, like the way hair flows.
Yeah.
So it's got a pretty unique look to it for this kind of pixel art. Madeline can jump. She can dash in 8 different directions while she's airborne. She can jump between walls that are close enough, kind of do a wall jump upwards. And she can also climb vertical walls for a short time. And she has a stamina meter that kind of erodes as she's climbing and doing different things. And when that runs out, she'll fall. So you can only climb for a little bit. You can dash only once in the air, but it replenishes if you land on the ground or you collect a green diamond. And sometimes green diamonds are sprinkled throughout certain stages that want you to do certain kinds of maneuvers. There are advanced movements that are kind of optional, and these are really technical and hidden almost in the game. The game does explain some of them later, but there are techniques called the wave dash, super dash, hyper dash, ultra dash. I don't know the intricacies and differences in all of them, but the game does teach you at least one of those in one of the really later stages. Madeline encounters several characters on her climb. There's Granny, who lives at the base of the mountain. There's Theo, who is also climbing Celeste Mountain, and he aspires to be a photographer. He wants a kind of a big following on, it's kind of an Instagram-esque social media platform. He wants to be an influencer.
Essentially.
Yes. And then there's Mr. Oshiro, who is a ghost who runs the Celestial Resort Hotel a little bit up the mountain. And then there is a side of Madeline in the game. It's called, quote, Part of Me, But outside the game, she's referred to as Madeline. And this is kind of the negative antagonistic side of Madeline, who's trying to dissuade her from climbing the mountain. She's trying to prevent her from reaching the top of Celeste. There are 7 chapters and a prologue in the core game, and each one will place Madeline on a different spot on the mountain with certain mechanics and obstacles that are unique to each area. And then there are 2 epilogue chapters that provide harder challenges. Chapter 9 is considered the hardest and longest level in the game. And sprinkled throughout all the levels, there are many, many dozens of objects, obstacles, and platforms that change up the gameplay. So there's spikes, springs, smashable walls, switches that unlock gates, bubbles that shoot you like a projectile, conveyor belt platforms. There are locks and keys, sinking platforms, sludge, bumpers, wind that pushes you back or pushes you down or pushes you forward, feathers that let you fly a short distance. There's material called Space Jam. So there's a list actually on the Celeste wiki, and it's like 90 some odd different objects that, and I didn't realize there were that many until I looked them all up.
Yeah.
I thought about as kind of a fun gag, just quickly listing them all off in this episode, but I think that would be more annoying than a novelty. But this game has many layers of completion. Each level has collectible strawberries that require completing additional platforming challenges, sometimes navigating to a hidden room off to the side of the main path and snaking through a couple of side rooms and then returning to the main path. There are crystal hearts that are hidden behind puzzles or secret paths. Those are used to access some of the bonus content later on. There are these cassette tapes that unlock what are called B-side versions of all the core levels. And those are harder versions of the levels with a lot of the same kinds of obstacles, but just remixed that will probably take you more attempts because they're much harder. And they also have different music. So they remix the level and some of the auditory elements. And then if you finish all the B-sides, there are levels called C-sides. And those are even harder than B-sides. They're actually shorter in total like screen length, but they're very, very challenging. And if you finish the chapter 8 B-side specifically, there are these things called golden strawberries, and you can earn 1 golden strawberry per level if you finish that level without dying, basically. You have to get from the start to the end without losing a single life. You pick up a golden strawberry, you have to carry it to the end, and if you die, you lose it. So lots of stuff to absorb if you are the completionist type. Lots of stuff to absorb if you love Celeste. So DiscoCola, I want to know, did you love Celeste? What was your experience like with this game, and what were your overall thoughts?
Well, I'm going to start by saying where I am. Longtime listeners know that I am sort of a compulsive completionist. Didn't know about those golden berries till just now. Wish I didn't. But I have done the all-in-one playthroughs of chapters 1 through 6, done all of the B-sides except for 7 and 8. And I got through as much of chapter 9 in assist mode to try and see the full story.
Sure.
But I did get to a gate that locked me out because I didn't have all the crystal hearts that I needed.
Yeah. You did mention the assist mode. I forgot to include that in the setup, but yes, this game is known for having an assist mode that allows you to slow down the game speed. You can add more dashes. You can even make Madeline have infinite dashes. You can turn on invincibility. So lots of ways to make the game more accessible to people who might find Celeste more of a challenge or too much of a challenge to finish the core game, right?
Yeah. So still, I've watched a YouTube video of the end of chapter 9, so I understand the epilogue. I just didn't get to see like all of the story beats up to that point. Anyways, so that's where I am. My general thoughts. While Celeste is foremost a platformer, it's also a bit of a puzzle game. And I wasn't really expecting that when I set out. So what I mean by that is your levels are pretty straightforward, and it adds all those new mechanics that force you to explore platforming in new ways. but some of those rooms are a little bit puzzly, so you kind of have to examine, if I use momentum on this platform, it's there for that reason. Why is it there, and how does this help me get through the room?
Yeah.
And so you sit there and explore that a little bit.
Not to interject you too much, but it's almost a game of resource management. You could think of Madeline's abilities like resources, and you can only use so much of them when you're midair or when you're in a series of platforming jumps. You can only dash once in the air unless you pick up a diamond. You will lose some of that stamina when you're climbing. And so the levels are calibrated to be solvable, but you have to figure out what order and how much of each maneuver to do to get through.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it adds the element of the strawberries to sort of like add a hard mode to that specific room. I love collectibles, but that's an interesting way to do it that I wasn't quite expecting. I think the music in this game is super freaking rad. My two top favorites that stick in my head are Confronting Myself. That's the music that plays during a particular boss fight.
Yeah,
I'll say.
I think you'd say that. Yep.
And then the
It's one of my favorite moments in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the Chapter 4 B-side song is incredible. I love that song. I hate Chapter 3 just in general. Kind of hate it. That's the hotel.
The hotel where you're helping Mr. Oshiro clean up his hotel, and you have a couple branching paths actually.
Yeah. I kind of hate it. Both the normal level and the B-side. Chapter 4, however, I found insanely intuitive in a weird way, and that's the level with a lot of wind.
Yes.
Usually hate windy levels, and when I got there for the first time and I was suddenly blasted with wind, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna hate this. But I found myself like figuring out most of those puzzly rooms pretty quickly and not having too much trouble. However, I do find a lot of this game to be pretty unforgiving, namely with anything that you have to kind of like bop on the head. I find those hitboxes to not have as much of a margin of error as something like the feathers or the recharge crystals.
So would an example be like hitting a springy platform or like a bumper?
I'm thinking more like, and again, this is a little bit of a spoiler.
I know what you're talking about. Okay. Yeah.
But Mr. Oshiru.
Sure.
Yeah. And spikes just in general, I find that their hitbox is pretty. They don't have a very big margin of error. It's like if you're just barely right there, dead. So that creates a lot of like unforgiving challenges that at times I found very frustrating.
Yeah, especially when a screen is so long.
Yeah.
And you get close to the end and then you have to restart it when you fail. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, there were a couple dozen really long rooms, and basically you're required to like trial and error. However, it's hard to learn the end of the room when the first couple of obstacles are just difficult, and not in like difficult in a puzzly way, but difficult in like actual
skill
input
and
execution.
Yeah.
So I would spend like 6 or 7 minutes just trying to get back to the new dash or the new jump that I want to learn. And I found myself there just one or too many times. Like I said, I'm a fan of collectibles. However, I found myself enjoying the B-sides a little bit more than the main game, and trying to collect berries. Like I said, the berries are kind of like the hard mode of the specific room. But I feel like that's sort of what the B-sides are doing.
Yeah.
Like it's just, that is the hard mode.
And you don't get those distractions of collectibles and B-sides.
Right.
You can just focus on the core gameplay, which is running, jumping, climbing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what Celeste does. I mean, not that, the story beats are bad, but I feel like that's what Celeste does best. And so even though, like, yeah, those are challenging and at times frustrating, I found myself really enjoying the B-sides quite a bit more. I think whoever designed this game is a literal genius. They use every mechanic in what seems every possible way, as well as using what seems to be like unintended physics and, behavior to traverse obstacles in new ways that maybe weren't planned on initially in the planning phase. And they designed some rooms I never would have thought of in like a million years. It's crazy. I also got the rare opportunity to relate to Madeline quite a bit. And most specifically, I've never played a game in a smartphone world where the main character didn't have one.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah.
And so the relatability doesn't end there, but that's the extent of the relatability I want to share. But it was so cool when she said, "Oh, I don't have a smartphone," and Theo's like, "I don't even know what to say to you," and I'm
Yeah.
just like, "I've been there."
Yeah, you are to Madeline as I am to Theo. That's so funny. Like we both have synergy there. That's cool.
So yeah, I do think Celeste is a truly special game with very tight controls. It's the second most difficult game I've ever played. Barring working on some God Home stuff that I still need to finish. And it's as close as I want to get to a Kaizo game.
Yeah.
I intend to finish, working on the all-in-one runs of chapter 7 and 8, getting the B-sides and even the C-sides. But I think that chapter 9 will be one of those things that I sort of chip away at over time, kind of like playing Hades. And I'm not going to look forward to doing that soon. I'm kind of a little bit burnt out just because of the high level of difficulty. But all the same, I want to give Celeste the score of a 9 out of 10.
Awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I was surprised to hear that you were a bit more attached to some of the B-side content, which isn't as friendly as the A-side content. But
yeah, it felt much more focused on what the game excels at. And that is intelligently designed rooms with really tight and difficult platforming challenges.
Yeah, I guess you're opening my mind to what the intention for those levels is, because I always kind of treated the B and C sides as more content for those more hardcore fans of Celeste.
There's no reason it can't be both.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it can be people who want that added challenge, the people who do try speedrunning, the people who want to grind on a level for hours, maybe days before they get it. But it's also for the people who appreciate the design and people who appreciate the work that goes into that kind of stuff and appreciate the focus in what it's doing too. So that's awesome. 9 out of 10 for you, DiscoCola. I'll go into my overall thoughts. I think Celeste achieves this really difficult balance of being hard but fair. And I think it tells a really simple but effective story that really thematically fits what kind of game it's trying to be. And this is really similar to what I felt about Hades, where Hades was this pretty hard game where you're dying over and over, but thematically and with that mythology, it makes a ton of sense because you're in a fictional place, you're trying to escape the underworld. It makes sense that when you would die, you would start over. Thus, we get a roguelike. It fits, there's synergy. And that's what's going on here. It's not a roguelike, it's a platformer. But the fact that it's such a difficult platformer that requires you to try over and over again, and that's ultimately what the story is reflecting too. It just makes so much sense, and it's done very simply but thoroughly. Also, like Hades, this is a really encouraging game. It uses pacing and teaching and incremental progress that helped me feel accomplished, even though I failed hundreds or thousands of times on one level. Just the fact that the game slowly stepped me into that progress made me feel like I was always making headway into climbing the mountain.
Well, and if I may, real quick, just like based on that death counter, you get a reminder as like a loading screen reminder. Hey, don't worry about your death counter. That just means you're learning. Additionally, as you finish the level and your death counter adds up, it's not like it replaces with your best, run. It just adds all of your deaths to a cumulative death count, which I think just prevents that stress of needing to get better.
Yes, the game does all these little things that make players both expect and accept failure. The checkpoints reload quickly, so you don't get that frustration of playing like a Mario level or even a really hard, I was thinking of Super Mario Maker levels that I've played where I play them hundreds of times and they were made by somebody who was a little sadistic and I want to finish their level, but every time I die, it starts me over. Even if it's at the checkpoint, the music stops and there's that brief moment where I just feel that momentum being lost. That's not happening in Celeste. Checkpoints reload quickly. Music doesn't stop. Those death counts, they're cumulative. They're telling you, hey, embrace all your failure. It's all adding up. You're the sum total of your mistakes. And again, that's something that's echoed in the story themes too. And there's this feeling of chipping away at the levels. And I like that in games where if I'm on a hard room, and I want to get to the end, I really don't mind that grind because I feel like I might get to that very last platform and I might make a mistake on the next platform, but at least I got a platform farther and I get a rush from that. I like that a lot. Yeah, the central idea of climbing a mountain is so intimidating, but we take those steady steps forward. And if you can't beat the mountain, maybe you can beat this chapter, or maybe you can beat this subchapter, or maybe you can just get past this screen, or maybe you can just get to the next platform. It's a game that matures in its themes the longer you play. You meet these characters that are kind of superficial and they're kind of shallow and they're just, in a lot of cases, goofy. And you think, oh, these are just kind of one-dimensional characters, right? But they grow in importance and they help Madeline learn lessons. And I love the lessons she learns about herself, how to cope with anxiety, how to work with your depression instead of being defeated by it. There is a moment in this game where Madeline has a panic attack. And the way that scene plays out, first of all, it's a moment that I would never expect in any game. I haven't had a scene like this in any game I've played, but Theo helps her out in that moment. And up to that point, he was comic relief and he was a fun character to talk to. And he said interesting and funny things, but he helps her relax and he helps ground her. He has her picture a feather and try to keep it afloat with your breathing. And you as the character are keeping the feather within this box and slowly all the noise dissipates and you're just looking at the feather. And I've had to do those kinds of things before. I don't know if you've ever had a panic attack. I've had them a couple times in my life and people close to me have taught me some grounding exercises. Like, I don't know if you've heard of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercise where you think of like 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. As you kind of focus on all your senses, it helps ground you. That was just making me think back to a moment when I had to do that same kind of strategy. And so I thought that was a really poignant and simple moment that helped me really connect to the feelings Madeline was going through. The platforming on the gameplay front, I think it feels really fine-tuned and precise. I often died because my own reaction time was poor or my judgment was wrong, not because the run or jump was calibrated wrong. And if you look into this game, there's lots of deep dives into behind the scenes on this game. They really tweaked and fine-tuned and experimented and tested this game to get all those little details right. The audio, I agree with a lot of what you said about the music. Great sound effects in this game.
Oh, yeah.
From Power Up Audio. Little details like the sound when you collect strawberries, that little triumphant little jingle. I just love little things like that. And they're all throughout this game. And kind of like you pointed out, I think it was the Chapter 4 B-side music you particularly liked. Was that the one?
Yep.
I preferred that B-side music. I love the A-side music, but that was a main draw for me for going into those remix stages is how did they remix the music? And I often enjoyed it more. So that's why I liked to play those stages. The game feels great, even when you're not skilled enough to do the optional technical mechanics for advanced players. You're allowed to try multiple approaches, which is a gameplay philosophy that's very similar to rock climbing. One of my good friends from college is a rock climber, and they described rock climbing as very interesting because everybody can bring their own strategy and approach to which parts of the rock face they attach to or they grab. And same here, you can choose to dash into a wall and then wall jump off of it, or you can just do a hyper jump, or you can climb up this wall on the other side of the stage and then jump off of that and do a dash. So there's often a lot of choice in how you tackle certain rooms. And then I just love Madeline and Theo. I think they're really relatable. They're really kind-hearted. I want to hang out with them. Little detail that I don't point out in a lot of games, but the journal that you can go to check your progress and your stats. I think this journal is amazing in this game. It's a very coherent summary of your total time played, your death count, and your collectibles. I think it's probably one of the best journals I've ever had in a game. So shout outs to the journal. And I just love the assist mode in this game too, to make the game more accessible to people. It's very dynamic, lots of options. You get access to the entire game with no restrictions. So the amount of people who can access this game through the assist mode, that just makes me so happy. I do have dislikes for this game. A lot of them are pretty minor, but the first time I played Celeste around when it came out in like 2018, 2019, I didn't mind that chapter 4 stage with the wind that you mentioned. I actually found the wind a little bit more frustrating this time. I found it a little tedious. Sometimes strawberries would mislead me to these one-way paths, and I couldn't backtrack. It was a very similar gripe I had with Grapple Dog from a couple episodes back, where I think I'm on the main path, and I think that if I go this direction, I'll go to an optional place where I can get some collectibles, and oh no, that's the main path. Or I want to go pursue this strawberry, and I get that strawberry, and now if I go to this adjoining room to the strawberry, oh, it leads me to this like one-way place. I didn't know that. I wish I had known that. So just a couple times of that happening throughout. But it is easy to reload sub-chapters, so it's not like it is wasting a ton of my time. I just wish I could have done it all in one run. I also think, not all strawberries are made equally. Some strawberries are just so extraordinarily hard compared to other strawberries. And ultimately, strawberries is more of a collection thing. The more strawberries you collect, the you get like a slightly different cutscene at the end of the game. And I think that's about it as far as what the strawberries affect. So it's really just for your own enjoyment and completion to get those things. And I know that equity in making them all the same difficulty level is impossible. Like you can't make them all the same difficulty level. I get that. But the delta in difficulty between some of them is super wide.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking of some of the ones in chapter 7, 8 that are just...
There's one specifically in 7 that I think I spent probably 45 minutes on just the one strawberry.
Yeah, I think there was one for me too, maybe in that same chapter, if not maybe chapter 6. But some of the strawberries, I took hundreds of deaths, maybe 1,000 or more deaths just to get one strawberry. And you're doing the same repetitive thing over and over to try to get that strawberry. And then I also think just when looking at the number of core levels versus the more advanced B and C side levels, it feels like the ratio of slightly more accessible levels to those harder levels just feels a little bit off. Like it feels like this game really worships its truly difficult content. I just wish there was more of that core game in there where it is the right balance of challenging but fair, So I wish there was a little bit more of a balance with that. But Celeste, it adds so many mechanics and visual art and auditory art to the world of difficult 2D platforms, and also resonant themes to this world of 2D platforms. You don't see these kinds of ideas in Super Meat Boy or in VVVVVV, you don't see those kinds of ideas. And the story and the gameplay are pulled together in such a beautifully simple way. It has charming characters. I think Celeste is a platform standard that everybody who's a fan of platformers should play. I'm going to score this. You might have thought it would be a 10 out of 10, but I think this is a perfect example of a 9.5 out of 10 for me. And this is the first time I've scored a game 9.5 on our show ever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. I thought for sure you were going to do a 10.
Yeah.
Mostly because I think you told me you were going to.
I know. I was a little confident about that. But I think since I played it in 2018, my tastes have changed just a little bit. I've played so many more games since then. And maybe it's the fact that I'm replaying it has a little bit to do with it. But I think this is a 9.5 for me. I think that's just where it makes sense.
Okay. Perfect. So I guess, how did you approach the game this time around? Or maybe your first time around? Because what I did is I wanted to go through all the main levels and I wanted to get as many strawberries as I could without a guide, which I slightly regret But that's what I did, and I did pretty well. I missed like 5 strawberries per level,
Yeah.
I would say on average.
Yeah.
But that was my approach. I wanted to do B-sides as I unlocked them, but I started to become worried about getting it done in time for recording.
Right. And if you're going to get only a portion of the game done, we'll focus on that core game, that
Right.
story, right?
Yeah.
Get through chapter 7 at least.
Yeah.
So I think that was wise to prioritize that. Yeah. The very first time I played Celeste, what I remember is I definitely focused on the main game, didn't look for the cassettes and the crystal hearts immediately. But if I saw them or I thought maybe this will lead to a hidden collectible, I would explore it. But I wasn't hyper focused on collecting everything. And as far as strawberries, I would mostly collect them if I noticed them. Sometimes they're on the main path. You can't miss them, right? So I'd go for those, but I wouldn't do a ton of exploring. I don't know why. I think I just wanted to have a more focused experience in that time. And this time I did something very similar to you, where I did try to find everything I could on my own. There are some crystal hearts and cassette tapes and strawberries that are so well hidden that I don't think I would have ever been able to find them on my own. So
Same.
I missed around, 5 to 8 strawberries per level. And I love how you can go back to the level select and it'll tell you which subchapter missing strawberries are in, and it'll tell you like chronologically, like which ones you're missing
Yeah.
too. I love that. That's another thing I love about this game, just that great forethought about what players will be worried about with collection. Then once I got through the first, 7 levels, I also was doing the thing where when I collected the cassette tapes, I did the B-sides, but I only did that through like the 3rd chapter.
Oh, okay.
And so then I moved back to the main path and focused on that. And then once I got through the main game, like before the epilogue, I looked up missing strawberries, went back and got all those without assist mode, unlocked chapter 8, then worked on 175 strawberries. Then I went back to the B-sides, and I actually used assist mode from B-side, I think 4 onward.
Okay.
I decided I just want to see all of these from start to finish. And I don't think I have the patience or time in my life right now to do all this, because we're going to have to move on to Kentucky Route Zero and my next secret game for the next episode of Underplayed. So
Yeah.
I decided to just use assist mode, and it allowed me to enjoy those bonus parts of the story with the epilogue too. So I used assist mode on chapter actually 8 and 9, B-sides 4 through 8, and then all the C-sides. And then because of that, it doesn't void trophies or anything like that. So I got the platinum in it this time. I think there's a chance on PC it has more achievements than the PlayStation version.
That's not uncommon. Hollow Knight's the same
Hollow
way.
Knight is the same way.
Yeah.
Hollow Knight's much harder on PC.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at with that.
Cool.
I wanted to ask you, we have that big master list of dozens and dozens and dozens of objects and platforms and obstacles. Do you have a favorite kind of mechanic in the game, a favorite part of the environment that the game throws at you that might be specific to 1 or 2 levels?
I found myself, like I said, I found the wind level weirdly intuitive for no reason. I shouldn't have been able to pick up on that as easily as I did. The little bubbles that shoot you indefinitely until you...
The red ones?
Yeah, the red ones. Yeah. I like those quite a bit. I like using momentum. I found that when I was using momentum in rooms that had a lot of spikes, that I would be more frustrated than I was having fun. So that was not always my favorite, but I do generally enjoy playing with momentum. I hate the feather. I find the feather very difficult to control properly.
Yeah. Did you play this game mostly with the D-pad?
Yes.
Yeah. I played this game only with the analog stick when I had the feather.
Okay.
Whenever I jumped into a feather, switched from D-pad to analog stick, and it's way easier.
I believe you. It would have taken me quite a long time to get to a place where that switch turns in my brain, because I was already having so much difficulty with if I had to do a series of left dashes and then
Yeah.
I had to do like an up dash.
Yes.
I would so many times do a diagonal dash on accident just because I'm fat thumbing it. And so I would be worried about doing that switch, trying to learn that switch. But
Yeah.
I recognize that like I'm pretty sure this feather is built for an analog stick and I should be using it.
Yeah. And it was something where it didn't always naturally come to me. I'd have to dedicate a portion of my brain to remembering to
Yeah.
move my thumb over, and I'd forget sometimes. Or I'd think, you know what, I can just do the D-pad, and then I'd die immediately. So yeah, it's hard.
There's also the second boss fight. There's only like so many boss fights. The second boss fight, the main one, if I consider that like a mechanic, once you bop that boss on the head,
Yes.
you have that like recoil.
Yeah.
I found that super enjoyable to play with, and just that whole boss fight in general, very fun.
And that takes place in chapter 6,
Yeah.
which I believe has the bumpers. I think bumpers are in that chapter.
Yeah.
And so if they're not, they're very close to that in the game. And so that mechanic is kind of telegraphed in a way because you're used to jumping on these circular bumpers. And I always felt like those felt really good. And I usually hate bumpers in games, especially when they make you move in such erratic and fast and unexpected ways. But yeah, the bumpers always felt really good. I always felt like I went where I was supposed to go. So bumpers were on my list.
Gotcha. I had trouble with bumpers, to be honest.
Okay. And then similarly, they'll put springs on walls sometimes, like pointing horizontally instead of vertically. And so that kind of acts in the same way, but it's different because your trajectory is much shorter, and faster. I also like, it's probably one of the most common mechanics and objects, but the diamonds that just refresh your dashes. I love those. I love that they make certain rooms more dynamic.
There's like that sound effect of the diamond, and like there's a small like slow down as that sound effect is going on.
I know. It's the little details like that add up. And then from chapter 2, primarily, the space jam, that stuff that you dash into and you go, and you pop out on the other side. I feel like that's the first, maybe aside from the in chapter 1 with the platforms on the conveyor belts that really launch you far distances. I feel like the space jam is a really cool, unexpected object that, when I first played the game, opened my mind to the possibilities of what the game might show me later on, especially when you zoom through it and you're approaching the other side and there are spikes on the other side. But then you learn, if you go through Space Jam, and it sounds like I'm talking about the movie. If you go through this stuff and on the other side there are spikes, you'll actually go through the spikes and not die. But if you do then land on the spikes, you'll have to restart that room. So it changes the rules in what you expect. And it might take a little trial and error to figure that out. But I love how those really added some kineticism to those rooms.
Yeah, absolutely. Very fun puzzles to figure out too.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you land on the other side of that stuff and it's just a solid wall, you'll die. It's the same effect of being crushed by a block. So you have to find places where there's a space for you to land. The game has a really fun, energetic, alluring community. I was looking at AGDQ runs of this game, and I was just kind of bouncing around this all chapters run. So they were doing I don't think chapter 9 was available at that point because chapter 9 was actually released as a free update at some point.
Yeah.
So at the time, I think they were doing chapters 1 through 8, and they were also doing all the B-sides. And the audience was really getting into it when he got to chapter 7. And you know how chapter 7, you're climbing to the peak of the mountain and you're hitting those checkpoint flags. It's the only level that has the checkpoint flags. They count down from 30. 30, kind of a reference to Celeste Classic. And the audience would yell out the number every time he hit one. And sometimes because he was so technically good at the game, he would skip entire checkpoints. And so the audience would be like, oh, we don't get to count that one. So lots of fun being had with this game, both in the people who are playing it and the people who are watching it. Have you absorbed any of that kind of content, or have you kind of gotten a glimpse into the community?
Yeah, I skipped a lot of speedruns because I I knew that I had the physical coming. It was delayed for a long time because it was waiting for the DLC to get on the disc. But I avoided a lot of gameplay videos. However, I did watch this this tool-assisted speedrun at one of the
TaskBot.
AGDQs.
Yeah.
And I couldn't stop watching that.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah. It's so crazy. I mean, when you add in the hyper jumps, let's see, what are they called? The hyper dashes, the ultra dashes, super dashes, wave dashes. When you combine all that stuff together, you could just do incredible things.
It's insane to watch.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah. I think it's
you're
fascinating.
Abusing that game for everything it is.
There's some games that are just fascinating to watch with speedruns because people found these super obscure ways to break the game's code, so they skip entire portions of the game. They just are able to shortcut something in an incredible way. But then there are those speedrunners who do incredible work because they're just so technically good. They have practiced a very technical game so much that they almost behave like a robot. It's so cool.
Let me tell you, I have no interest in ever being good enough at any game to do that that people do with Celeste, man.
I actually have a friend who has posted online on social media about how much he loves Celeste. And he's played Celeste on a couple, I think, Steam and Nintendo Switch. And I've looked at his play hours and he's played it for a couple hundred hours on each system. And so this game really gets its hooks in certain people. And I just love that about it. So,
I can see that. I don't, for now, like I said, I'm a little burnt out, but I could see myself I kind of want to get better at, Chapter 5 B-side. Maybe I'll go play that real quick.
Yeah. And it's also a game where I played it 3 years ago or so. And the idea of coming back to it for Underplayed, I was super energized by that. Even though I had played it before, it's one of those games where I was ready to play it again and excited to play it again. So I could see myself playing it again, maybe not to practice it a bunch to get better and to speedrun and stuff, but just to revisit it as an experience in maybe another couple years. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, do you have an estimated total death count for either a particular part of the game or for the entire game? Do you have any idea?
I don't remember. It's probably because I think I have 700 on just Chapter 7 vanilla.
Yeah.
So it's probably somewhere 3,400 or something.
Yeah. I think I was around that when the first time I played, and I think because of the B-sides, I did more of the B-side stuff this time, especially B-sides 1 through 4. I think I was closer to the 5,000 or 6,000 death count.
And I could be there. I didn't pay too close attention to it once I realized I don't have to worry about getting a 0 death, run necessarily until you told me about those damn.
I'm sorry about that. Hopefully you can sleep at night knowing that information.
We'll see.
Well, I think that's a great place to end. Thank you for playing and reviewing Celeste with me, DiscoCola.
Hey, man, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would.
You can play Celeste on PC, Mac, Linux, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. DiscoCola rated it a 9. I rated it a 9.5. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed and on common podcast services like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg, and our art comes from Oni Mochi. Underplayed is on Twitter at underplayedpod, and you can find me on Twitter at Bopo, that's BO_PO, and check out that same handle on the GG app where you can see my game lists and what I'm currently playing.
I am at DiscoCola on Twitter and taking a break for now on Twitch as my infant grows, but I am streaming most Underplayed games there as well.
Next time, we will have 2 more secret games, and our featured review will cover a game that hopefully won't make my hands hurt, Kentucky Route Zero TV Edition, an adventure game developed by Cardboard Computer. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.